Projects typically have a variety of stakeholders. You remember that we defined stakeholders in the first chapter as anybody who has interest in our project. So managing the stakeholders and communicating with them is the subject of this chapter. So there are a number of things we are going to look at in this chapter. We are going to understand the importance of stakeholders, how we manage the stakeholders. We also describe the key processes in managing communications. We also look at how can we improve communications within a project. And finally, we look at some of the collaboration tools that are available and can enhance project communication significantly. The case study that was covered in the textbook was about Channel 9, which is Microsoft's way of communicating and engaging its developer community. Channel 9 refers to the channel that is, or at least used to be on many airlines that broadcasted the conversations in the cockpit. So essentially, Microsoft is giving an opportunity to the developers to hear what goes on in the cockpit of Microsoft products that the various developers are interested in. So let's first focus on stakeholder and stakeholder management. There are a number of steps we need to take for stakeholder management, and it starts with identifying who are the stakeholders in our project. Then we have to plan how we engage specific stakeholders and manage that engagement and monitor the engagement and adjust as it needs to. One way of categorizing stakeholders as we think about identifying stakeholders is examining their power and influence. We clearly need to manage closely the stakeholders that are powerful and influential. At the same time, we need minimal effort to monitor stakeholders with less power and influence. And we need to keep the powerful stakeholders with less influence satisfied with what goes on in the project. And finally, we need to the influential stakeholders with less power, we need to keep them informed. Another way of analyzing the stakeholders is to divide stakeholders into several categories in terms of power, in their ability to influence the project, in terms of their legitimacy, in terms of being impacted by the project, and in terms of their urgencies, in terms of needing to know the information about our project. As you can see, there is a kind of a Venn diagram looking at the intersection of these attributes of stakeholders, and of course the places where these attributes intersect. It increases the prominence and the level of attention that we need to give that that group that has more attributes of these three attributes. And this is what is called salient model, and you can see how the different level of prominence and attention is given to the different areas of this Venn diagram. Another way to analyze stakeholders is based on their involvement with the project. The stakeholders can range from those who are unaware of the project to those that are actively engaged and leading the project to its success. They have a keen interest in our project. The most concerning group when we look at stakeholders are those that resist the project. They require special attention to ensure that they don't negatively impact the project, and hopefully we can actually influence them and move them to become a project supporter. So one effective tool is in terms of stakeholder management is stakeholder engagement assessment matrix. So this matrix basically lists all of the stakeholders on the left and categorizes them in terms of their involvement and their engagement with the project. And for each stakeholder, we put a C where we think they currently are, and we put a D where the desired state for that stakeholder is. And as you can imagine, the greatest effort would be involved with stakeholders that the C and D are far apart, like in this example, stakeholder 1, moving them from unaware to at least to a neutral level. That's probably a major undertaking. Of course, the other challenge, as we mentioned, is in this example, stakeholder X, moving them from resisting the project to at least become neutral. That also can be quite a task. Now let's look at project communications management. There are a number of steps that we need to consider. One is to plan our communications management, manage communications, and then monitor the communications. You see this trend in many areas of project management, that we need to plan, manage, or execute, and then monitor. And of course, as part of monitoring, we need to adjust if we are not achieving the outcome that we expect. So any communication involves the sender to prepare the communication and send the communication, and the receiver receives the communication and interprets it. A successful communication requires that the receiver sends some sort of feedback or acknowledgement in terms of their understanding of the communication back to the sender, so that the sender can ensure communication was interpreted correctly. This step number 4, is the control step in communication. So project communication can be very informal, can be very formal. Also, communication can be in person or can be remote. Some of the informal communication are most effective ones. We shouldn't discard them or ignore them. I remember that when I was at U.S. courts, I would use the gym in our building during lunchtime, and it was amazing how many conflict or issues I was able to resolve through one-on-one conversations in the gym. Also, communication can be horizontal or vertical. Horizontal communications are typically less formal. For example, the communications among the peers, while the communication between an employee and supervisor, or communication between two organizations, are typically more formal. We have to decide what form of communication is most effective every time we want to communicate. Should we use synchronous or asynchronous communication? In-person meetings or video conferencing are forms of synchronous communications, and voicemail and email are examples of asynchronous communication. Communications can also range from relatively lean to rich communication. For example, memos, emails, reports are on the lean end of the spectrum, while face-to-face or walkthrough meetings are richer in content because of the ability of participants to ask questions and make comments. This table looks at different attributes of various communication methods. And you see that the face-to-face meeting can be highly or loosely structured. It is synchronous, of course, and it is rich because it allows full interaction among participants and can be appropriate for small or large group of participants. So how can we improve project management communications? One of the most important things in project is running effective project meetings. It's incredible how few meetings are run effectively. Presentations are also made in projects very frequently, so being an effective presenter is a key skill for project management, and that's why we practice it frequently in this class. Have you ever had a conversation where you felt the other person was not listening? The fact is that most people notice when you're not listening, because a good listener can truly be a life-changing, or becoming a good listener can be truly a life-changing experience for one. We also can use communication templates to make sure that we are consistent and we provide all the information that is necessary. And finally, making a walkthrough presentation or meeting is a good way of sharing updates on the schedule, on the project with various stakeholders. All right, let's now first focus on meetings. And let's look at checklists of what we need to do before, during, and after meetings. So before meetings, we need to make sure that the purpose of the meeting is clear. We establish some ground rules, and we distribute the agenda and reading materials prior to the meeting. When we have the meeting, it's important that it starts and ends on time to re-emphasize the importance of being on time and respecting participants' time. It is also important that the roles such as the chair or a discussion leader, scribe, timekeeper, and presenter, if one is needed, are all established. The discussion leader should, from time to time, summarize the discussion and points of agreement or disagreement. It is also a good practice to have a parking lot for topics that come up during the meeting and will need to be discussed later. At the end of the meeting, all action items that have been brought up need to be assigned to individuals with due dates. After the meeting, the minutes need to be prepared and distributed to participants in a timely fashion. In more formal meetings, draft minutes are first distributed or sent out to participants so that they can make comments within a set period of time before the minutes are finalized. It is a good practice to use organizations' ground rules, and if there aren't any, you establish your own ground rules for your meetings. When I was at Chevron, in our group, we established a ground rule for people so that people would be on time, and that whoever was late would pay $1 for each minute that they were late. The money was used for team celebrations, etc. When you think about it, late start of meetings wastes a lot of time of the people who came to the meeting on time. So they're just sitting around and wasting their time while they're waiting for other members to join. So when you add up all that, there is really a significant amount of money being lost when meetings don't start on time. There's a very good podcast from the Freakonomics radio series, and it is How to Make Meetings Less Terrible. The title itself is a little bit telling in that many people don't like meetings, but we have some 5 million meetings every day in the US. And there is a tremendous opportunity for any organization to save employees time by making their meetings more effective. One of the tricks that is pointed out in this podcast is to set a tight time for meetings rather than most meetings are scheduled for 1 hour or 2 hours. Instead of that, if the meeting requires 30 minutes, 40 minutes, well, that's what it should be done. And it's found that meetings that have tight time frame, they're actually much more effective meetings. In the agile project management approach, there is this concept. This concept of effective meetings is applied to have a 15-minute stand-up meeting every day where the project team members update everyone about their progress and especially focus on if they're running into any issues, so that in a very short period of time they can resolve any issues that they have. Presentations are also used throughout a project for briefing team members and external stakeholders. Like meetings, presentations are often not well prepared or delivered. So let's look at some of the guidelines for making presentations more effective. The planning of a presentation involves considering your audience and focusing on the message that you want to pass to the audience, or the information that you want to pass on. You need to be thinking in what environment do I need, will I be delivering this presentation, and accordingly adjust it. If it's through a video conference or is it through a personal presentation, you need different preparations for the environment in which you will present. The presentation needs to be designed in a logical sequence and a consistent way. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Don't overuse animation, and try to have a variety of things in your presentation, like including videos. Is always it changes the pace of the organization and makes it more interesting. And finally, for good delivery, you need to practice. You need to practice. You need to practice. For any presentation to come across well, the more practice you do, the better it will be. And you have to deliver it with practice. You can deliver it smoothly, confidently. Make sure that you're all set up in advance before the time of delivery, and you know the software and equipment that you will be using. So we all have run into situations where the person you're speaking with keeps interrupting, seems distracted or impatient. And it is very frustrating to experience that, because you don't feel the person is really listening to you. On the other hand, good listeners pay attention to what you're saying, ask clarifying questions, provide feedback, even through their body language. So such conversations are much more pleasant and much more satisfying, and the communication and it is far more effective. Many projects use a set of communication templates to make sure that the information is consistent, the layout is consistent. This is an example of a project change request form. The form captures all the required information about a change that is being requested, and it also captures the final decision on that change. Of course, many of these templates are built within the technology infrastructure of the organization and what the project uses. For example, many of these are templates can be set up on, say, SharePoint, and then the review and approval steps are all then built into the form. So it goes from individuals to individuals for their actions. Lastly, let's talk about walkthrough meetings. Walkthrough meetings are structured review meetings and are used frequently in projects to review the deliverables as they are being finalized and make sure that the stakeholders understand and agree with the completeness and correctness of the deliverables that are being finalized. On this slide, you see a number of scenarios where walkthrough presentations are used. Walkthrough reviews are also used for incremental commitment, meaning that the project gets the agreement of the deliverables from from the previous phase before the next phase starts. For a walkthrough meeting, like any other meeting, you need to make sure that you have key stakeholders, such as users, maintenance folks, and presenters, all involved, and so that you have representation of all the key stakeholders that need to be present in the meeting. This is a template for capturing key issues raised in a walkthrough meeting. And this is the issues that raised will need to, of course, be actioned to be addressed. And this form captures the action items and their status. Collaboration technologies have advanced significantly over the last several years. Google introduced the first online document in 2006, and since then, of course, it has added Google Sheet and Google Presentation and Google Form, among other tools, to their online collaboration tools. Microsoft introduced Office 365 in 2011, and it's a comprehensive set of online collaboration tools that they provide in that environment. An online document or a wiki site, the online documents such as Word Online or Google Docs, they record edits done by various team members to a document. It helps collaboration tremendously and avoids sending or passing on documents serially among the people who need to review and comment on it. So it compresses the time for review tremendously. Video conferencing, such as Google Meet or Zoom, are used extensively when individuals cannot be in the same location, such as in a global project or during a pandemic. Most video conferencing applications allow participants to share their screen with others, which really helps communicating the points that they are making. Groupware software such as Microsoft Teams supports same or different time, as well as same or different place group interactions, as you can see in this slide. Electronic meeting systems such as Zoom or Collaborate Ultra provide virtual conference rooms and breakout rooms that any of the participants can use using their own preferred device. Many of the electronic meeting software provide the ability for participants to quickly vote on items, and this again helps the efficiency of the meeting significantly. An example would be the polling feature that exists in Zoom. enterprise social networks such as Microsoft Yammer can provide a very secure way for project team members to communicate on various topics and keep those conversations in an organized way. So this concludes our the lecture on chapter 4 about stakeholders and communications.